So I want to briefly just point out a few instances in this discussion section, or in the sections I've selected from the discussion section written by Henry and his colleagues, that really are great examples of some of the key rhetorical moves that are common in most discussion sections in MERETI articles. So notice the first sentence right here. Our study represents the first extensive study reporting on the prevalence of research misconduct among investigators of different institutions in the Middle East, similar to other studies performed in Western countries, and so on. So right here is the major contribution of the study, and kind of like hinting at the big picture, and the context with existing research, right? Namely, it's similar to other studies that were performed in different geographical areas. And then our data indicate it's a significant issue to be addressed, namely scientific misconduct. Some more specifically, some more evidence, what the data showed, and right here is the main finding, right? Main or key finding. Our data showed, again, really clear language. Our data showed, I'm going to highlight this actually. Our data showed super clear language about indicating to the reader, here is our main finding, right? And then support for that, call back to the study that was mentioned already in introduction, Finelli, right? A comparison context with existing studies. So lots of really good things going on in the first paragraph. But again, the focus is on what's the major contribution, context with existing studies, and then via really mentioning the key finding that answers the aims that were, or part of the aims that were outlined in the introduction section. So if we continue the next paragraph, the next paragraph is something really interesting as well. It says something actually about the challenge of doing this kind of work, right? Because it says comparing frequencies of misconduct between different studies is challenging, as methodologies and the types and definitions of research misbehaviors might differ between the studies. With this caveat, right? So the authors are really clearly saying, we know this is challenging, we know there's some issues with this, but we're still going to do it because there's value to it, and here we tell you why. And so for the rest of this discussion, for the most part, until we get to the very end, limitations and the conclusion and suggestions for further studies, what this discussion does is it compares its findings with the findings in other studies and contextualizes this study's findings, some of the more specific findings on certain areas like plagiarism, right? How we hear, right? So this paragraph talks about plagiarism. Further paragraphs further down, which I've omitted, address other issues that are part of research misconduct. So plagiarism is the first one that these writers focus on in this particular paragraph. And again, lots of citations, context with other studies. Again, the key finding is there's been at least one instance of research misconduct, and the more detailed secondary findings go into detail on the different types of research misconduct. So really well structured, always a great topic sentence, clearly communicating to the reader what's going to come with lots of support. All right. So we're going to skip a lot of the body here. Just one paragraph I wanted to point out from the middle of this discussion on the different findings. I love the language here. We also showed that having obtained a degree from a Western university was significantly associated with a lower prevalence of fabrication and falsification on multivariate analysis. So again, there's also a conversation about what are some factors that reduce the risk or the likelihood of research misconduct. And I love this phrase here. We also showed that. Very clear again with, here, this is what we showed, this is what our results show, this is what we're contributing to the larger conversation, right? So connecting again to the big picture of why the study is significant. So just wanted to point out again this language here. I really like that. Again, followed up by citations and some context from existing studies. All right. And then we get to the end of this, the last two paragraphs here. I can't put them on the screen at the same time. Let's look at the second to last paragraph. There are several methodological limitations to our findings. First, and then another limitation, and it continues throughout this paragraph. Why there are limitations? Very clearly, like, hey, this is why this is a limitation to our findings, but also contextualizing and explaining why even though there are limitations, why this research might still be very useful to look at and to consider in a larger conversation on research ethics and research misconduct in certain geographical regions. And then the last paragraph, a wonderful, a really great focus on, what else could be done while we wait for more definitive studies, which this study isn't, right? But it points us in the right direction. This is what's recommended. What is missing here at the end of this discussion is maybe another rephrasing of the big picture of the main contribution, which isn't always necessary. It's nice to end. I see this often in discussion sections. They end with what are some further recommendations, in particular with studies that focus on providing some tangible suggestions on how to address a particular issue, in this case, addressing research misconduct. So my suggestion would have been, as if I would have edited this work, to maybe add a phrase or two to restate again the major contribution of this article, because it really has a lot of evidence for that, just to kind of wrap it up a little bit. But it doesn't mean that the article is not useful or well written or well structured because it's missing. But that would have been an added benefit. Okay, so and off next we are to a short video if you have time today. If not, you can watch this some other time as well, or on your own, on the writing process for a research article. If you kind of feel overwhelmed by enough of IMRED, enough of introduction, methods, results, and discussion section, you can always watch this on your own, or if they have some time in another section, you can add it to them.